Hello, everybody, and welcome to Office Hours. I'm Adam Coble. This is Office Hours. It's an advice show about tabletop role-playing games. Sometimes it's an advice show about other things, but we try to focus on RPGs. I'm a game master. I've been a game master for a really long time. It's kind of a silly title. Like, every time I say it, I feel like a little bit embarrassed, I guess. Listen, Dave, Gary, buddy, Dungeon Master, not great. Game Master, still not good. But that's what I do for my job. That's my life. I run role-playing games. And as a result of having done that for a very, very long time, most of my natural life, in fact, I have accumulated a fair amount of knowledge, I guess. Like, I know how to do it. And one of my favorite things is sharing that knowledge, is helping other people figure out how to do a better job doing the thing that I do. And rather than give kind of fluid, kind of mamby-pamby advice, I don't like giving advice that's general, which is why I haven't, like, written a book or whatever. I like giving specific advice. So every time we do an episode of Office Hours, which is to say more or less every other week, we do an episode of Office Hours, I answer 3 questions. Just three questions, specific questions from you, or you, and then we try to talk about what that means in a greater RPG sense. So some of these questions will be about particular games. Some of them will be about a specific situation for somebody's campaign at home. But I hope that regardless of whether this is something specific that would be helpful for you or not, I hope that it's interesting. I hope that you can understand why we're answering these questions and why people are having the trouble that they are. And if you're interested in engaging in some discourse about this, feel free, right? Talk about it in the chat. Discuss it in the comments. And what we do is every week we answer 3 of these. And if you want to submit a question to Office Hours, you can do it. Because if you don't, there won't be a show. So please go to www.adam-coble.com. Click on the Office Hours link, fill out the form, record your voice if you like, and we will talk about your particular role-playing game issues. Now, speaking of recording your voice, I would really just like to thank Ollie, the first question asker, for recording their lovely voice. And I think you'll agree, we're all better off for it.
Hi, Adam. I'm GMing a D&D 5 campaign, and my players very frequently run afoul of established law and order. I want their actions to have civic consequences, but I don't want to impinge on the fun, the flow, and their agency in the campaign. Do you have any good suggestions of how I might manage this? Is this more of a question of changing the campaign to suit their more sort of bandit style? Or are there better suggestions for how I might make law and order a thought in the back of their minds when they're doing these things? Thanks very much.
So, Ollie, I'd love to answer your question, but I wasn't paying any attention to what you said. I was just listening to your lovely voice. That's not true. I was listening. Here's the text version. It's much easier to pay attention to. Ollie, thank you for recording your lovely voice for me. I hope that you have a long and exciting career in whatever voiceovers you plan on doing. Ollie, start a podcast. Do it, man. Just read the phone book. No one cares. So Ollie asked how to make law and order a bigger aspect in the decision-making for players. So it's not about necessarily Ollie asking how to realistically portray systems of law and order. It's not necessarily about any of that stuff. It's more about putting it in the heads of the characters. Right, and if I had thought ahead, I'd have the sound effect right now. Just pum-pum. You can imagine it. You know what that sound effect sounds like. So this is a thing. This is innately, intrinsically a thing. And I've been thinking about this because I think this runs right up against the whole idea of the murder hobo, right? There's basically a spectra of behavior for player characters in a game where at the far end of this spectrum, there is characters who are respectful of the law, who care about maintaining and upholding order, who do not break the law or violate its tenets and statutes. And then there's everybody else on the other side, right? There's this, and I think the reason why murder hoboing, which is to say, like, characters that are not tied to anything, characters who do not give a shit about society or the world that they live in. I think that what makes this happen is Dungeons and Dragons, right? Dungeons and Dragons caused this to occur because of the structures of the game, and then every game since then has, to a degree or not, emulated what Dungeons and Dragons does. So in Dungeons and Dragons, the characters are given lots of tools to solve their problems, but the tools that we are given the most detail about, the most granular tools, are the ones for combat, for fighting, and thus for killing, right? Which in most societies is against the law. We're given tools for other things, and certainly a role player is able to solve their problems in a bunch of different ways. But by default, what Dungeons and Dragons cared about was fighting monsters, defeating them in combat or avoiding combat with them, caring deeply about the mechanisms of combat, and then reaping the rewards therefrom. And I think that if you watch the sort of growth of RPGs from D&D, is you start to see a pattern develop where other games will focus primarily on similar things. Even if a game happens to be about the eternal struggle of vampire clans over 1,000 years, you know, it still focuses on the rules for fighting, because that's what we've learned to prioritize, and that's what's sort of the most high stakes. But it also teaches you that if you want a reliable solution to your problems, combat is a good way to get that, right? Combat is a way to engage the mechanisms and to say, I know what I'm doing. Now, that works, you know, based on the original sort of structures of D&D. Go into the dungeon, fight the monsters, do the thing. But even in early D&D, you see this struggle with, say, for example, the Keep on the Borderlands. So in the original adventure, Keep on the Borderlands, the eponymous keep sits at the threshold of the Caves of Chaos. Now, the Caves of Chaos are where you're supposed to go and adventure. You fight goblins, you fight kobolds, you fight a bugbear or 12. You know, there's monsters there, and they have treasure, and you fight them. But the game has given the Dungeon Master stats and treasure for everyone who lives in the keep. And if you add up all the treasure that can be gleaned from going in the dungeon, and you add up all the treasure that could be wrought from killing everyone in the keep, there's a lot more money in the keep. So the winner way to play that adventure is to go to the Caves of Chaos, recruit the monsters, and turn them loose on the keep, murdering everyone inside and taking their money. So this is a thing. This is something that I think Alignment has attempted to, I don't necessarily want to say solve, but certainly put in people's minds. I think that there have been various ethical systems added to games to kind of try to mechanically orient folks against being murder hobos. But I think what it really comes down to is player style, right? Like, compare and contrast, right? We have two science fiction RPGs, campaigns using the same system, right? They both use Stars Without Number. One of them is a game about a crew of mercenaries in a deeply anarcho-capitalist sort of libertarian universe where they fly around and they do as they please and they fuck over anybody who gets in their way so that they can make money, right? And then the exact same game, same reward structure, same mechanisms, etc. That same game, but the setting is a feudalist setting, an imperial feudalist setting where a class divide is being met by the burgeoning rise of a middle class. There is very strict universe rules, law and order. It is a lawful evil universe, and the player characters in that serve the status quo. They're functionally paladins of the status quo as a group. So this is about preference, right? This is about player style. This is about preference. This is about setting the stage at the beginning for the game to be about something. And I know that most D&D games tend to run the gamut of these things, right? So it's not as easy as that example that I've given. If you don't preset those requirements early on, if you didn't sit down at the beginning and say, all right, everybody, are we going to be murder hobos? Are we going to be lawful? How is Law and Order going to fit into this campaign? If you didn't do that at the beginning, you likely ended up with a group that has a chaotic neutral thief and a lawful good paladin. And how do you come to terms with that stuff? Sometimes all the players are in one place and the world is in another. Conflict is most easily resolved by sitting down with your players before you start the game, which Ollie, you obviously didn't do to a degree, because this would not be a problem necessarily if you'd had that conversation. But my suggestion would be for everyone else, before you get into a game, just talk about that, right? Talk about what you expect response of the law to be when players do things. Like, are you just going to let them kind of get away with it? Sometimes the game will let you know what the social structures are in the game to be expected, right? Like even in Vampire the Masquerade, we have, again, the eponymous masquerade. We have the masquerade itself, which is supposed to create tension in the game. Do we break the law, which is to say, let people know that we are vampires and do as we please, right? Or do we adhere to the masquerade? Is this a Camarilla game? Is this a Sabbat game? Is it somewhere in between? Is that going to be a theme? But it's built into the game, right? But a game like Dungeons and Dragons and many other games doesn't inherently assume there is a particular law or order. So set expectations when you sit down, right? Be like, do you want me to be real about how Law and Order works in this universe? Because if you do, I will. If you break the law, people will come hunting for you. If you don't break the law, then you'll be okay, but there's going to be tension, right? That's what's fun about the law, is that player characters tend to be outside of it. They tend to have a very low barrier to breaking it, because the consequences, what's going to happen? Like, you lose your character? It's not like in real life where the cops will fuck up your life if you get on their bad side. In Dungeons and Dragons, you can like lose your character, and that happens. So people want to be able to have that feeling of consequence freedom. So you want to talk to them. You want to say, what is the deal? Because sometimes they just want to be murder hobos and for it not to be a big deal, right? Maybe in your setting, that's not the case. And player expectation is gone out the window. The players expect to be allowed to do whatever they want, but you are like, you killed a cop. The whole campaign is about how you murdered those town guard. You will never be allowed in this town again. Ever. Right? They will hunt you to the ends of the earth. Paladins have sworn oaths to chase you down. Right? Because that's kind of how it can be if you want to be realistic about it. Where like crimes don't just fade away, right? If you leave town, they will send bounty hunters after you. Like, you have just set the tenor of the arc or the campaign, right? So letting your players know in advance, and then during the game checking in about that stuff. And you can check in before they do this, right? One way to make Law and Order a bigger aspect in their decision making, remind them, right? Dragon Heist does this. The published Dungeons & Dragons adventure, Dragon Heist, does this. It gives them an in-game copy of the laws of Waterdeep. Because in Dragon Heist, if a character gets in an argument with a town guard and attacks them, that character's campaign is over. Like, I don't care if they get away from it. That's the whole rest of their game. You can't finish Dragon Heist if you kill a town guard. You're not allowed, because you are now a criminal. You are like deeply hunted, and there's no way to participate in that adventure. You can't own property. It's a whole thing. So yes, you can bend your campaign, you can chase it around or whatever, but if you want Law and Order to matter in the universe, you're going to have to help your players learn that that's the case. And I don't just mean in universe, right? you know that if you've been watching the show for a while, you know that I'm not a fan of punishing player behavior with in-universe consequences when they don't match up. I don't believe that if you want to teach your players a lesson, we're not here to do that, you should punish them with stuff in the universe. So what you can do is just establish fictional conditions for stuff. Like tell them, okay, so you know breaking into a noble's estate without justification is illegal. You know that murdering this person is not your purview, right? I know that they're a bad guy. I know they're a villain. I know they attacked you first. But if you murder them, you will go to trial, right? The guards will come and try to arrest you. If you kill a guard in full view of daylight and witnesses, your life in this city, as you know it, is over. You will be taking your character and maybe this campaign in a whole other direction. Is everyone okay with that? Because some players might say, all right, cool. If you want to do this to your character, if you want to kill this NPC and kind of ruin your character's life, that is on you. Please leave the party, right? We will disown you. Because you can't let someone drag the whole game down just because they're like, I murder them, I'm chaotic neutral, right? So talk to your players about it beforehand. Talk to them during. Let them know what the consequences are. And feel free to bend reality, because realism is fake in role-playing games. Realism isn't fake. You want consistency. So if you want a cinematic universe where the cops are incompetent and don't follow too hard and act like Grand Theft Auto cops, where eventually they'll just leave you alone, crime forgotten, establish that cinematic universe stuff early on, right? Talk about what breaking the law looks like in your world. It's a fun thing to discuss. And then also take a cue from Apocalypse World and from Dungeon World and say, tell them the consequences and ask, if you do this, this might happen. Do you want to do it? Okay. All right. Now you know the consequences, right? That's about making soft and hard moves, right? You don't want to hit them in the face right away with like, oh, you didn't even know that was illegal. Now you're arrested. The only time you would want to use that mechanism, that like, you did a thing, now you're arrested, is if you want to show something about a new setting. If the players go to a new city and they make no effort to get to know it, and you want to show this city is an authoritarian regime with some weird rules, you can be like, cool, you leave the inn and you are wearing your traditional blue wizard's robes and everyone is staring at you. There's some gasps and some whispers. A young man runs off as soon as he spots you. What do you do? And if they're like, I don't know, these guys are weirdos, we just keep walking, I go to the market. Then you can soft move again. You can be like, people continue to stare at you as you enter the market. Someone shutters their stall as you approach. If they still don't do anything, then you can hit them with the hard move and be like, cool, the town guards show up and they say it's against the law to wear blue on this day. This is a holy day to the god of blood and he hates blue. You're under arrest, right? Soft moves, you don't always have to frame this as you walk out of your house and everyone looks at you. It's illegal to wear blue on Tuesdays. Do you do it? Right? You can continue to remain in the fiction, but play them up with soft moves, right? Show them that their behavior is unacceptable to the status quo, and then let them decide if they want to double down or not, but let them know that there are going to be consequences. I think the thing here is that you just don't want to come down on them too hard, right? Right away. You don't want to come down on them too hard because they didn't know. The worst feeling is saying like, well, if I had known, my character would have done something different, right? Now, being able to say your character doesn't know, cool, now we're in this situation where you have to like argue your way out of illegally wearing blue on the day of the Lord of Blood. Like, that can be fun. But like, yeah, soft moves, impending dread, this idea of something is wrong, what are we doing? Because a smart group of players will be like, oh, I see everybody is looking at the wizard I'm going to go up to a person and be like, excuse me, I see the way that you and your friends are looking at my wizard friend. Can you tell me, we're not from here, what's wrong? Right? I'm going to investigate. Or they'll make a religion check and say like, wait, what do I know about this place? Aha, today is a day that is holy to the Lord of Blood. I don my bluest robes and we go to the temple because we got to go offend these people. The Lord of Blood is our enemy, right? Like, give them more choices, but tell them the consequences. Now, if they leave and they come back and you're like, cool, welcome back to Bloodsburg. And they're like, cool, all right, well, I put on my blue bandana. And you're like, you're in Bloodsburg, and they don't notice or care or forget what you've told them. Then you can be like, cool, welcome to jail or whatever, blood god jail. Death, I guess, that's what that's called. So yeah, give them the chance to figure out that something is wrong, but also let them know things that their characters would know that the players might not, right? Like, this is what the code legal in Dragon Heist is for. This is what you as a GM can do to say, hey, so you're a paladin and you grew up in Neverwinter, so you know that what your friend is doing right now, peeing on this statue of Timora, that is super illegal. Maybe you want to stop them before the guards show up, right? You're allowed to do that. Try to do it. It's just fictional positioning. Try to fictionally position the characters as knowing more or less about the law based on who they are. Paladins and lawful characters inherently are better at following the law. When I say paladins, I mean like lawful good, like paladins the way I see them. There's no such thing in my brain as a chaotic evil paladin, but that's another question for another time. People who are lawful, characters who have shown interest in the law, characters who care about following orders, those sorts of things, use them as a channel to warn your players fictionally. Be like, maybe you'd like to make a history check. This seems like illegal to you, but you can't quite place why, right? You have this opportunity to flow through the players to give them information. And as far as not ruining the campaign or ruining their fun, just talk to them as players. Be like, are you having fun being on the run from the cops? Do you want me to back off on the cop stuff? Like, I don't want you to just get away with murder with impunity, but like, where do we balance that line? Where do we find the safe thing? Because honestly, part of being a criminal, part of playing a criminal type character, someone who breaks the law, is that it's fun to transgress, right? So if you just let them get away with it all the time, the rogue is going to be like, oh, well, cool. I guess I just steal more stuff if no one's going to stop me. I firmly believe that people, human beings, as much as they whine and complain when things get in their way, they want to be challenged. I feel like part of playing games is being challenged. And that's why I GM the way that I do. I put the weight on players. And so I think you can too. And if you find the legal system of the world to be a fun way to invoke that challenge, talk to your players and then do the thing, right? Don't baby them, but give them a chance to, as people, input for you what they like or don't like about that. And then check in, right? Be like, cool, how are the cops doing? Are you having fun being on the run? Would you like to focus on something else? Maybe it's time to leave the city and go hide in Sherwood Forest for a little while, right? Navigate that stuff. Navigate it with your players. But let them know in the moment, like, you are about to fuck up drastically. Do you still want to do that? Right? Again, coming back to Apocalypse World, soft moves, tell them the consequences and ask. I don't care what game you're playing. Those things can be incredibly useful, those kinds of moves. Yeah.
When playing Burning Wheel with new players, it is, of course, wise to hold off on using the combat subsystems like Duel of Wits and Fight. But at some point, they will make an appearance. They're interesting systems because in a board gamey fashion, the more you play them, the better you get at the chess match, the mind games, the metagame. The easier you can outwit your opponent with a clever scripting choice or choice forks in your die pool. So my question is, with new players, should you hold back? And if so, how much, and how can you keep it interesting for yourself as a player? Thanks.
So Zelbinian is asking a question that comes up a lot. This is a really specific question. It's about a very particular game, but I think that we can look at it in terms of games in general. But the Burning Wheel has a whole bunch of subsystems. Duel of Wits, Fight, and Range and Cover are the big ones. But even circles, resources tests, Those things are subsystems in the game. And the text of Burning Wheel, you get to a certain point, 70 pages in or so, and the text tells you, play. Go and play this now, right? As you play the game, introduce Duel of Wits, introduce Fight, introduce Range and Cover as you need them. So how long do we hold back on these subsystems, right? How much? When do we use them? When we're playing with new players, at what point do we introduce those, right? And the other thing about this too is how much of these subsystems are designed for players to resolve their conflicts in a detailed and granular way, right? Like, how much are you robbing your players of access to these systems, and how much do you fuck with the game if you just never use them? So if you remember or have watched at all the Roll20 Presents Burning Wheel campaign, we never used Fight once. I probably never would, ever. We never used Range and Cover. But we use circles constantly, resources pretty often, and we use Duel of Wits a lot, as far as these things go. The subsystems will be engaged or not engaged in your game depending on how much your game needs that content. A game about roving knights will definitely have Fight more often than a game about courtly drama, right? So let the situation of the game determine this for you, right? Talk with your players when you start the game about what subsystems you plan on engaging and what ones you're going to leave off, unless they randomly come up. But for the most part, I think you can kind of preload this. I would say play your entire first arc without using anything more complicated than circles. I love circles, and so I consider it a base mechanic of the game, and I wouldn't skip it at all. But like, Duel of Wits can be covered by a bloody versus test, or just a straight up single test, right? You don't always have to go to those big systems. I would say do the first 10 to 15 episodes or sessions of your game without engaging any of those things. Then, when you're done with that first thing, introduce one thing. Introduce Duel of Wits and try it, right? Introduce Fight if that's what your game needs. I find with these subsystems doing mock combat can be really helpful because then the stakes aren't really high. The hard thing that comes up, and I sort of wish that I had done this with Blue Jay for the first time we did Duel of Wits in that campaign. This is looking back, this is a mistake that I made. I don't feel like she as a player had a very good time with Duel of Wits early on because she didn't understand how the mechanisms work and felt like her character was fictionally bound to the results of a system she didn't fully grok, which can feel frustrating and unfair. Not because I had an advantage necessarily, or because another player had an advantage, but because it's hard to get to the end of a thing and be like, well, I understand now, but I have to live with the results of the previous version of me that didn't understand. So what you can do after that 12 or 15 session arc is sit down and say, okay, it feels to me like Duel of Wits is going to fit nicely into this game. Let's do some practice duels. Let's bust out our characters, do some practice duels, get a handle on how it works, and then we'll do that in the game. I sort of wish that I had done that in the Burning Wheel game, but I'll remember better for the next time I play with people who are new. So that way you can teach them the system, and then they will learn how to do it before they jump in and do the real thing. This can be true of any complicated role-playing game, right? We used to, when I would introduce people to AD&D, we would do mock combat. We would make characters, we would do a mock battle, and then that would be the first session. Because the mock battle would help us understand the choices we made so that we could go back and adjust the character build accordingly. I think this stuff is really important. Yeah, that's right. Hidetsugu pointed out in chat, we did that with Andrew for the fight mechanisms when Rooster was gonna start doing the fighty. So yeah, you can set aside some time with specific players to teach them these systems. What I think is really interesting, and what I like about this question, the reason why I decided to take the time to answer it, is that Zelbinian recognizes the real purpose of Duel of Wits and Fight, especially Duel of Wits, beyond just being there to resolve stuff. Like, I think those systems are great when you're engaging in a big, serious moment that needs granular mechanisms, just like a fight in Dungeons and Dragons. An argument in Burning Wheel deserves its own system. And yes, it's important. And yes, it plugs into the Artha wheel and how we generate points and stuff. But what it really is a way to resolve conflict between two players who get to prove they know how to play this game better than each other, right? I have spent many hours in the company of Burning Wheel headquarters, and one of their favorite things to do is brag about how good they are at the various subsystems of Burning Wheel, Mouse Guard, and Torchbearer. Like, talking about the time where they pulled one over on each other is a common topic, and so you can see that written into the rules. This idea of, I'm playing a character who is a lawyer because I am personally very practiced at Duel of Wits, and I'm excited to beat people with my game skill. In the exact same way, someone might play Pathfinder and say, I know more than any other class how to make a really, really good wizard. I will be an excellent wizard. I'm going to play a wizard. I'm going to pick all the best spells. I know just how to cast them and when. I know all the good tricks. Skill, player skill factors into gameplay. Right? In the same way that basic D&D took player skill into effect. I think that we have seen a slow move for a lot of games, a slow move away from player skill as something that we value in games. But there are still a few games that hold to that idea that if you are good at a role-playing game, you will have a better experience. Because your character will get what you want them to have more often. So I think that cutting out all of the systems, playing like a light version of Burning Wheel, does both the game and your players a disservice. Because ultimately, choosing to play the greatest duelist in the land is backed up by your skill at knowing how to outscript people in the fight mechanics. So don't rob your players of that, right? One of my favorite tensions in Burning Wheel is the difference between role-playing a combatant and playing to win, right? This comes up in D&D too. This idea of the right thing to do here is to avoid on the first volley. That's not true. Avoiding on the first volley is never the right thing to do, but you know what I mean, right? The correct thing to do is that, to win, right? However, my character has an instinct that says, always go for the throat, right? In a battle, always start with a killing blow, right? Just like go in swinging. So now I have to choose, and Burning Wheel does a great job of this. Now I have to choose between the tactically sound decision and the thing that's going to get me Artha by letting my instinct get me in trouble, right? And I'm going to get chopped up into pieces maybe. And that's fun for the GM too, where you're like, okay, so I'm playing a knight and I am fighting several bandits. The bandits are likely going to be RPG'd as they're going to be played as like a bit bumbling. Hopefully the GM is going to play them according to their beliefs and their instincts, and they're not going to fight as well or as disciplined as I will. So that's the thing for me, the fun tension in the game. Again, the game mechanically incentivizes this tension between me, the player, Adam Coble, who wants to win at fighting in this game, and me, Adam Coble, the player, who is playing a character who wants their own things, right? This is the Pendragon situation, right? This is the situation in which Pendragon gives you a character that wants different things than you do, right? So that, I think, is what's really fun about Duel of Wits and Fight, is that the tension becomes between the player and their own character. And I think we should embrace that. So should you hold back? No. Not forever. How much should you hold back? More at the beginning, less as you go. Some things forever, right? Some things just don't need to be in your game. So sit down and talk to your player and say, okay, everybody, we've reached the end of this arc. We've gotten the mileage we need out of the first 70 plus pages of Burning Wheel. What subsystems feel like they're going to fit in the game? I personally think, as sort of a closing note, I personally think that Duel of Wits belongs in every game of Burning Wheel. And I say this because, and this is just like a little bit of like Burning Wheel trivia for you. Burning Wheel has Duel of Wits not just to allow players to be socially adept characters, not just to resolve fictional disagreements, but it was created, at least in part, to resolve player conflict, right? We should go north to help the dwarves. No, we should go south to help the elves. Let's argue about it, kind of in character, kind of out of character, for hours until someone decides, someone gives up. Like, fine, all right, we'll go to the north. I don't care anymore, right? That's how a game without this system does it. Duel of Wits, in part, was designed to be like, okay, you want to go here, you want to go here. Your characters argue about it. Whoever wins, that holds. End of statement, right? And that's important. And I think the Duel of Wits belongs in every Burning Wheel game because it means that the people whose characters are better at arguing for what they want will get to guide what the party does. And I think that's super important. I wish more games had systems like Duel of Wits to help resolve that stuff. I mean, Jesus. If you watched last week, if you watched any of the roleplay shows, if you watched Court of Swords, if you watched Far Verona, I could have used Duel of Wits in both of those games. So it's a tool. It's a good tool. It's already in Burning Wheel. It's one of the main reasons to play Burning Wheel. Use it, but don't use it right away. Do 10 or 12 sessions, then talk about it. That's it. It's not that hard. I don't think that Burning Wheel is that complicated. I think it just, people get confused because they try to do all of it all at once, and that is too much. Every fight is not a fight with an exclamation mark, right? Only some fights, only shit that really matters. And the way you tell that things matter in Burning Wheel is beliefs.
Hello, Adam. I would like to know, what do you think about being versatile when it comes to improve as a GM? Do you think it's a good goal to improve with the aim of being good in every situation? Or is it better to specialize in a concrete genre, player type, system, or setting? Thank you very much for this show.
Cassian, this is a great question. So Cassian is talking about improving as a game master across the board, right? How do we get better at being a game master generally? And should we improve at a whole bunch of things? Or should we just improve at one or two specific things? Now, I think I'm torn. I'm torn on this because I think that diversification of one's skill set is massively important. I think you should read all the books and watch all the movies and check out all the comics and like do everything you can possibly do to become a more versatile, more worldly, better educated human being, period. Paint, draw, take photographs, sing, go for walks, try everything, because then you will improve across the board. You'll get a better understanding of the world around you, and that'll make you a better game master, right? But I think as you do that, as you try to become a better rounded person, you will learn the things that you are more inclined to be good at, right? You will find the stuff, right? For example, anybody who has watched my content since I started has been able to, and I've seen this come up lots. You know this probably better than I do as an audience, the things that I am good at or not good at, the kinds of things I focus on, the types of characters that I make, the kinds of themes I put in my game, the sorts of settings that I create. Like, these are things that become clear as you go, and as you learn those things, you can either focus on them and become very good at the things that you are naturally inclined towards, or you can acknowledge them and try to focus on other stuff, right? That's the thing about versatility, is that applying your skills to a bunch of different situations is useful, but you're always going to be better at some things than others, right? You are not lifting your skill set as a flat board all the way up together. Some things will just naturally improve because they're things you like more or are naturally good at, right? Some people are really good at doing characterization. They're good at voices. Some people are really good at world building, but not great about moment-to-moment scene setting, right? The kinds of stuff that we are good at are products of natural talent and practice and passion, right? You can be talented at something and you can practice it a lot and you can get good at it, but if you don't love it, you'll never be as good as if you love the thing and you practice it, right? Despite your natural talent. Think about it as like a triangle, right? Passion, talent, practice. Chances are pretty good you can manage two of those things. But the way to find out the things you're passionate about or talented at that you might want to practice is by trying a bunch of stuff. So what this means, and honestly, like, this is a good reminder for me to myself, try different stuff. Try different stuff. Like, try a mechanical focused game, try a more narrative focused game, try a GM heavy game, try a game with no GM, try sci-fi, try fantasy, try urban fantasy, try realism, try absurdism, try comedy, right? Play Fiasco, play Microscope, play Apocalypse World, play Burning Wheel, play D&D, play another kind of D&D, play 6 more kinds of D&D, right? Play good games, play bad games, do all of this stuff and see what you like. It's a combination of being willing to experience a lot of different things and being capable of introspection. Capable of introspection about those things. Because it's one thing to be a gourmand of the great table of role-playing games, and it's another to be able to understand why you do or do not like something, right? This for me is the difference between being able to have a serious discussion with someone about something and not, right? If someone says to me, that game you like, it's bad, right? Say somebody says to me, Apocalypse World sucks. God forbid. I'm going to say, okay, why? Why do you think that? Why don't you like Apocalypse World? And if they say, I don't know, it just sucks, it wasn't fun, I will stop that conversation. I will say, okay, I don't need to talk to you about this anymore. Bye. Right? But if they can, see, now I'm all blurry. Hi. There we go. If they can give me a reason they didn't like it, then we can talk, then we can understand it. And in the same way, when you play a game, be aware of what you do or don't like about it and your experience. Because if you don't like something, if you're not passionate about it, it's good to know why, because you might abandon it too early. Case in point, okay? So I played Pathfinder when it first came out, a fair bit of it. Like, not a lot, but enough to understand it. I played it once. I hated it. I played it 3 times. I wasn't really digging it, but I understood why other people might like it. And by the 6th session or so, I was like, okay, this game is not for me. It has too many small modifiers. I feel like the pacing of it is quite slow. I'm not really interested in thinking forward about my character build. I like a game that's a little more fluid. Cool. I've had an experience with this game. It's not for me. Now, years later, a 2nd edition came out, and I was like, okay, I know what I didn't like about Pathfinder. I would love to try the playtest to see if the things that I didn't like have changed. Now, if I had just played one session of Pathfinder and been like, I hate this game, when the 2nd edition playtest came out, I'd be like, oh, Pathfinder, I hate that game. I wouldn't understand what about it I didn't like, and I wouldn't know what to look for. So in that same way, if you ask me why I like or don't like literally anything that I like or don't like, I promise you I have made the effort, at least to some degree, to understand why I feel that way. Because I think that's so important. It's really easy to play something, not understand it, and bounce off of it because you're frustrated, right? It's also really easy to commit to a game that is terrible because you're familiar. So my advice here in terms of like versatility as a base is try everything, right? Play as much different stuff as you can, experience as many different games as you can, and then give yourself some time to think about it. Have conversations, talk on the internet, talk with your friends, talk with the people who played it with you about those games. And as you do that, right, as you learn, you will pick up stuff from every game, right? The way I play D&D, the way I game master Dungeons and Dragons is informed 80% by the Dungeons and Dragons rulebook, and then 20% a bunch of other games that I've played, right? Like, I run Dungeons and Dragons a bit like Burning Wheel. I run it a bit like Dungeon World. I run Stars Without Number like a bit like Torchbearer, right? So the games that you like, you will find things about them that alter and change the way you play other games, and that is good, right? Play the games by the rules, but where there are empty spaces, and every role-playing game has empty space by design, you will fill that empty space with your own personal style, and that is derived from the other games that you've played, right? The reason that D&D feels the way it does when I run it is because of my experiences with other games. I think this is really important. I think this is a thing, because if all you ever do is play Dungeons and Dragons and watch Critical Role, your GM experience will be emulating Matt Mercer and reading the rules of the role-playing game, right? Branch out. Branch out. But don't do it because you want to be equally good at everything, because that's not going to happen. You will never be good at everything. Do not try. That is a good way to drive yourself completely insane. Instead, try and be willing to fail at things. Improve the things that you think you are passionate about, right? Again, the triangle. If you're passionate about something but have no talent, you can practice. If you're passionate about something and you have talent, you probably don't have to practice as much. If you're talented and you practice, you can get good, but you won't have any passion, right? So I think that's a good way to look at things in your life, right? Am I good at this because of who I am as a person? Have I practiced this a ton? And do I care about it, right? So the goal here is not to be good at everything, but to find those things and then build stuff up, right? So for me, I like certain things. I like rich worlds that exhibit themselves through their NPCs, right? I like settings in which the players have to choose whether to be bad like the universe or better than it, right? If you notice, most of the settings that I have created, most of the games that I run, the world is not a nice place. And the players have to choose to struggle against that or join in the backwash of villainy, right? I know that. I know that's a theme for me. I like sci-fi better than I like fantasy. I'm just better at it. My brain runs better on sci-fi, right? So these are things that I know about myself. And that's, again, bringing it all the way back. The most important thing is a combination of broad experience, focused attention, and a willingness to understand why you feel how you feel about the things you are doing. And for me, and maybe this isn't possible for you, but for me, making a performance of my role-playing games has absolutely helped me introspect, right? Because you, not Cassian, but you, my audience, you're very perceptive. And your only job when we're doing these campaigns, your only job is to pay attention to the characterization, listen to the details, watch for game mistakes, right? Like your job is to pay attention. And then some of you have feedback about that. And while I don't know that it's necessarily all feedback I would agree with, it's all valuable in the sense that I understand how I am being perceived. Right? That's right. Yes, thank you, Dave. Scrute unto me so that I might scrute unto myself. It's really valuable for me. And you can get the people, if you don't have a big audience of people on the internet to do this, you can get your players to do it. You can be like, so today I tried a different narrative technique. I described things like we were in a TV show. How was that? Was that good? Did you feel good about that? Did I do an okay job? How could I improve? Workshop, discuss, right? It's not about putting yourself out there for criticism, but about saying like, I was trying this thing. What did you think? Right? Help fuel your own introspection. But again, like a game design, know what you want, right? Know what you want out of that feedback. Do not go in blind and let the feedback guide you. Do not do that. That is a big risk, right? If a player says you're being mean, understand that that is their feedback, that is their experience, and it is real. But what they're really saying is something deeper about themselves, right? They're saying, when you attack us with deadly encounters, I feel overwhelmed because I don't understand the rules well enough yet to fight back. Can you give me some room? They don't mean you're a dick, but they might express to you you're a dick. So it's hard. This is that playtesting thing. All feedback is good. Solutions to that feedback are almost never useful, which is why I invite, how did this make you feel? Did you like or not like this? Why did you like or not like this? Please use statements about yourself. Talk about how you felt and what your experience was. Don't tell me I'm a dick or not. I don't care about that. And I will use that to fuel my goal, right? I will use that to fuel my goal, which is to become a better game master, which might mean I adjust my behavior. It might mean I adjust the way I exhibit that behavior, etc. Because people can't give you solutions when they don't know what your overarching plan is. This applies to game design. It applies to GMing. It applies to feedback in general, right? Listen and then solve the problem with your own brain. So yeah, I don't know. I think versatility is good, but I also think specialization is excellent. I think that versatility lets you shore up places where you're a 0, brings you up to like a 3 or a 4. But it can also give you a foundation upon which to build the pinnacles of your skill, right? Find what you're passionate about, find what you're talented at, figure out what you want to practice, and then get good at some things. You don't have to be good at everything, because God knows that's actually impossible. You just can't. It's just not possible. So that's our episode for today. That's episode number 74 of Office Hours. Thank you for coming, everybody. I like talking about role-playing games. I especially like it on days where I get to play them, because by the end of every episode of Office Hours, I'm all fired up. I'm all excited to play a game. I hope you are too. I hope you're excited. Take what we have spoken about today and apply it to your own home campaigns. Talk to your groups. Engage in discussions about it on the social medias, because I think the better we get at GMing, the more we should talk about it. And the more we talk about it, the better we're going to get, right? Share your own tips and tricks with other people. What have you learned? Because you're having an experience at the table no one else in the whole world is having. You know, you're that shuffled deck of cards. The chances that your exact experience at your role-playing table is going to be replicated anywhere else is astronomically small. So I think you have an opportunity, just like me, to teach other people things. So share and discuss. And if you have questions and you want to get involved, www.adam-koebel.com, little Office Hours link. Click that, fill out the form, submit a recording of your voice if you want. If you sound like Ollie, my goodness, let's just listen to that question one more time. Ollie, I got to tell you, listen to this. If you sound like this, definitely record your voice.
Hi, Adam. I'm GMing a D&D 5 campaign, and my players very frequently run afoul of established law and order. I want their actions to have civic consequences, but I don't want to impinge on the fun, the flow, and their agency in the campaign. Do you have any good suggestions of how I might manage this? Is this more of a question of changing the campaign to suit their more sort of bandit style? Or are there better suggestions for how I might make law and order a thought in the back of their minds when they're doing these things? Thanks very much.
No, Ollie. Thank you. And thank you, audience, for coming and for listening and for hanging out. This has been episode number 74. We will see you next time.